Hi, you're watching Cooking with Diane. I'm Diane, and today we're going to be making a really springy pesto. Traditionally, pesto is made from fresh basil, toasted pine nuts, Parmesan cheese, and garlic. However, it's a really great way to use up extra greens in any season. I've made pesto from kale, arugula, parsley. If it's a green, it can probably be made into pesto. So in my pesto today, I'm going to be using some slightly unconventional vegetables that are fun to explore. These are called garlic scapes. This is like a green shoot that comes out of garlic plants in the early spring. They look kind of crazy, but they have a really great strong garlic flavor, so they're great for pesto. I'm also going to be using carrot tops. I bought a beautiful little bunch of baby carrots from the market last week, and they came with the greens still attached. Carrot greens are totally edible. You can always chop them up and saute them or add them to soups. I do find they can be a little bit of fibrous to eat on their own, so that's why I like to chop them up and add them to pesto. And the last early spring vegetable I'm going to be adding is some fresh arugula, which is always great to put in your pesto. Arugula has this nice strong peppery flavor, so it adds a lot of punch to your pesto. Any greens that you want to put in your pesto need to be washed before they go in so that your pesto doesn't end up gritty or sandy. The best way to wash greens is to dunk them in a bowl full of water, swish them around in the water so that all of the dirt falls to the bottom of the bowl, and then lift them back out of the water. You don't want to dump them along with the dirty, sandy water into a strainer because then you're just dumping all that dirt right back onto the greens. Now I'm going to dump out this water, give the bowl a rinse, and then start prepping my greens. Really all I need to do to prep them is to give everything a rough chop. The garlic scapes, I use everything except for maybe the very bottom and the very top. And just a rough chop is fine. So now we have our greens and garlic scapes all washed and chopped and ready to go in the pesto. Let's talk about what else is going in the pesto. Traditionally, pesto is made with pine nuts, which add a little bit of fattiness and unctuousness to the pesto. They also help hold everything together. You can use any sort of nut or seed though. I love to use walnuts, or if I'm trying to make a nut-free pesto, I'll often use pumpkin seeds, but you should use whatever you have at home. Today I'm going to be using pecans. The best way to use whatever nut or seed you've decided to use is to toast it in the oven at 350 degrees for 5 to 10 minutes or until it smells really good and toasty. That will add a lot of flavor to your pesto. You also don't really need a lot of whatever nut or seed you're using. Usually just a half a cup is plenty. Something else that I like to add to my pesto to add a little bit of brightness and acidity is fresh lemon juice. So I'm just going to cut this in half so it's ready to squeeze into my pesto whenever I'm ready for it. And something we're going to add last is some fresh Parmesan cheese. So I have a microplane grater and my Parmesan cheese ready to go. Traditionally, pesto would be made in a mortar and pestle, but I prefer to use a food processor. It makes my life a lot easier, and that way I can make a lot of pesto at once. So I'm going to start with the big chunky things that really need to get broken up before I can add the greens. So that's my pecans and the garlic scapes. And if you don't have garlic scapes, just use a couple cloves of actual garlic. So because the pecans and the scapes are firmer than the greens, I'm going to give them a couple pulses to give them a head start. So you can see there's still some big chunks in there, but we've mostly broken up the pecans at least. You can also add some lemon at this point if you'd like, or you can wait until later to add it. It's up to you. Now I can start adding my greens, and I probably won't fit all of them in here at once, so I'm just going to add them one handful at a time. So if the greens seem stuck and they're not going down in the food processor, Now's the time to add your liquid ingredient, which is actually going to be olive oil. The best way to add the olive oil is to stream it in while the machine is running so it can emulsify the mixture. Once one handful of greens is chopped up and is taking up less room, you can add the next handful of greens. So you want it to be blended enough and to have enough olive oil in it that it comes together into a smooth-ish paste like that. You can leave it a little bit chunky if you like a chunkier pesto, or you can blend it really, really smooth. That's up to you. But you do want it to come together into a paste and not look like just chopped up greens. So if it's still looking kind of dry and choppy, you probably need to add more olive oil. So next we're going to add the cheese, which I don't like to add while I'm blending it because the blender or the food processor would just mush up the cheese too much. So I find it has a much nicer texture if you grate it by hand at the end of blending and then just fold it in. I like mine pretty cheesy, so I added about a cup of grated parmesan. It's important to give it a taste so you can decide if you want to add more salt or lemon or garlic. Pesto's really strong, so just taste a little tiny bit. Don't take a whole spoonful. I love the flavor of this, but it's still a little bit crunchy and fibrous, so I'm going to add some more olive oil and blend it for longer. And you can tell that I added more oil and blended it longer because now my pesto is lighter in color. So I'm going to taste it one more time and just check that it's where I want it to be. That's great. It's garlicky, so it's got like a little bit of pepperiness from the garlic and the arugula, but it's also creamy and unctuous from the cheese and the nuts and the olive oil. Now my pesto is ready to get tossed into pasta, tossed with roasted vegetables, spread on toast, mixed into eggs, mixed into soup. But this is way more pesto than I'm ever going to need in the next week. So you can store your pesto in the refrigerator for about a week in a closed container. Or if you've made a lot like I did today, you can store it in the freezer for 6 months to a year. I recommend freezing it in multiple small containers rather than one big container because you're more likely to use a small amount of pesto than a huge amount of pesto at once. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.